Hi, this is Fred Copestake, your host to the Selling Through Partnering Skills podcast. Based on the book, the podcast explores how sales professionals can use the power of partnering intelligence to take their selling to the next level. By combining the skills associated with better partnering and existing best practice, salespeople can ensure their approach is more modern and collaborative. There are 6 elements to PQ, and in each episode we look at how sales professionals have used these and how their insights can contribute to your success. Okay, so this week we have Clare, who is the founder and the consultant at Marlowe Sales Academy. I'm really excited to talk to Clare today because we have worked together quite a few times, dating back to the very first trip when we were working together on a quite a big training team and flew off to Miami, if you remember, Clare. So thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Excellent. No, it's really great to be here. And yes, that was a great gig, certainly, back in Miami, which was a nice place to work. But yeah, really great. Looking forward to talk about partnership skills and sales skills and so forth.
Yeah, so before we get stuck into the elements of PQ, perhaps you could just give us a little bit of background on yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my background's actually in the IT industry. So I originally joined ICL back in the late 1980s, scarily a long time ago, and went into their graduate training program and then went into sales and key account management. And actually for a while I set up my own business. I had a little bit of entrepreneurship as well, recycling toner cartridges for laser printers. And then about 15-20 years ago, I then went into consultancy and training, first of all with Fujitsu Services, which basically morphed from ICL many years ago where I'd been a salesperson. And spent a little bit of time learning obviously my trade, training, mainly salespeople, sales enablement, and also managing the sales professional community at Fujitsu. And then 10-12 years ago, probably went completely self-employed to set up Marlowe Sales Academy. And basically, I particularly specialise in helping sales people to be much more consultative, to identify, target and win larger opportunities. Primarily in the IT industry, but all sorts from banking, accountancy to service industries.
Excellent. So absolutely steeped in sales, and yes, I know quite a lot of the way that you do approach things. So yeah, what I want to do is just sort of explore a little bit then how, looking at the way that you would encourage salespeople to become more consultative and to get better at doing a sales job, how you might start to use some of these elements of partnering skills. I know you wouldn't necessarily classify them as PQ, but I know certainly you would use lots of these elements. So let's start off with trust. You know, trust is the foundation of all relationships. Without trust, there's not good communication. So how do you help salespeople focus on that area?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one because you can look at trust as sort of an equation, which I know some people sometimes look at. I like to look at the trust bit and link it to credibility and value. So to a large extent, it links in with mindset. And I know you like to talk about something called PQ, which I'll be certainly interested to find out more. So the mindset, if you've got the ability to trust, you must be trustful. So if people are going to trust you, you've got to be genuine, authentic, and all those things. And from my sense, if I'm teaching consultative selling or solution selling, it's the mindset of genuinely wanting to help the customer for the long term. Those salespeople that focus just on the short term tend to be more transactional because there's no fallout if anything goes wrong. As soon as somebody is doing repeat business, relationship selling, and they want repeat business to come back, then the customer's got to trust you. Because if they don't trust you, you're not going to get the future sale, which comes back to the mindset of let's try and help our buyers and our customers to succeed in their business. And therefore, that then helps me to put forward the best solution for them. Because that's all the customer ever wants. All they ever want is the best solution for them. What they're worried about is salespeople trying to sell them stuff that maybe isn't the best solution for them. And the reason the customers don't trust us is because other salespeople have sold them things where they've regretted it afterwards, got buyer's remorse, and therefore they then have a tendency not to trust salespeople so much. So if we can get the salesperson to have the mindset of genuinely helping the customer and demonstrating that lots of different ways, then that actually proves you can trust me. So just saying that I'm trustworthy is not good enough. It's got to be followed by actions.
Okay, so walk walk the talk as much as anything else is what you're saying.
Have the mindset to begin with, and absolutely walk the talk and then prove it.
Okay, so how can we help salespeople with that mindset? You talked about the mindset needs to be about helping people. How can we as trainers, how can we as consultants help them to develop that better, do you think?
That's a really good question. I think one of the things is to really help them to get into the mindset of the customer. And one of the ways you could do that, I mean, obviously you can do it for role plays, and people talk about sitting in the shoes of the customers. People talk about it, they don't really experience it. So either try and get them to do role plays as the customer more, get them to think about when they bought things that have been high value to them, who do they trust? And also look at research. So there's an awful lot of research that says that the number one reason that somebody will buy one supplier from another is, do I believe you understand my requirement? And those people that really understand the requirement are the people that I trust more, that I've explained stuff more to them. So I've got to be able to get them to do better discovery and really understand their customers and have better experience. So I suppose, yeah.
Okay, so role play as the customer. So you'd get people to sit in on that side of the desk, if you like, and pretend that they're their own customer, they're a generic customer. How does that tend to work?
One of the techniques that I use that you're familiar with, Fred, as well, is I quite like get them. I mean, you can do some very formal case studies and role plays and so forth, but a really simple exercise is say to somebody, think about a real customer opportunity that you had, a real customer situation where they were interested in buying something, you were interested in selling them something. And it could be something where you've actually sold successfully to them. So I don't really mind what it is, but take that real case study. So, for example, if it was an IT sale, somebody might have sold them a network upgrade of some sort. And I'll say, okay, let's rewind that back to the original phone call where someone said, look, and whether it was a proactive or reactive phone call, the customer said at some point, the performance of our network is not as good as it could be. Come and talk to us. That's all the person needs to know as practicing it. Now, the person whose customer is, I want them to be the customer, because in reality, they know a lot more about the customer than they're letting on. But the only information they need to tell their colleague, the salesperson, is, you just had a call, whatever, I've got 1,000 staff, 1,000 users of IT, I'm this sort of company, this sort of industry. Now prepare that call and come and do some discovery on me, ask me some questions. And of course, because I'm the customer, the salesperson who's playing the customer now, they actually know quite a lot about the customer. They can talk about it. And that's a really interesting way of genuinely putting them in the shoes of the customer. Because what they'll do is they'll hear their colleague asking them a question and they'll think, oh, crikey, I always ask that. And either two things as a result will happen. Either, oh my God, that's really good, I should carry on doing that. Or as a customer, that's just gone very negative salesy. It feels like you're forcing me down an alleyway, or it feels like you're not letting me talk. And I don't like that. So I need to stop doing that.
Brilliant.
And we know that genuinely, most of us salespeople, we need to listen more.
Oh, definitely, without a doubt. But that exercise, you're right. You know, we've worked together on programs using that quite often, and it's so simple. Even if somebody says, I can't play my customer, well, there you go. They've got a massive learning point that they don't know enough about them as well. So it works on so many different levels, doesn't it?
Yeah, and they don't even have to pretend. You don't even have to say, I don't want you to pretend to be them. I want you to be yourself in that role, in that situation. That's all. So don't try to be anything else other than yourself. Just react to what the salesperson's saying. You'll actually know quite a lot of information. So the question should be fairly straightforward. But yeah, be yourself, and then see what it feels like. And that's what customers don't like, when they think that someone's pushing them too much. They'll back away.
Really insightful way of operating. Look, we could talk about just the trust element of partnering intelligence, of partnering skills, for the whole of the half hour. But I do want to move on. And one of the other elements that we talk about quite a lot is win-win orientation.
Yeah.
So often in sales, we'll wrap this up as focusing on mutual benefit. Again, it is related back to trust. How would you encourage, or how do you help salespeople to sort of think more about that as an area?
That's interesting, yeah, because often people talk about win-win a lot in negotiations, of course. So that's, I think, where it originally came from. I think sometimes people misdiagnose the idea of win-win. So I think people need to talk about win-win and get the definition of win-win correct. Because win-win, as a semantics, I don't think necessarily helps as much as we think it is, because it implies I win and you win. So therefore I get the best possible deal and you get the possible deal. And we know that's not actually what win-win's all about. But so I think sometimes win-win as a mindset doesn't always necessarily help. So my definition of win-win would be, as you say, that both sides come out with satisfactory outcomes. I'm happy with it. It might not be the best on one scoring, but on the whole deal, I'm very happy with it. I can hold my head at high, I can justify it, and I feel happy with it. But the problem with, so it's, I mean, it comes a little bit from, obviously, from principal negotiation from Harvard, from the book Getting to Yes. I think it's one of the places where it's in. But the win-win as wording, I think some people misunderstand it without actually having done any training. So to actually understand the win-win, it's about a long term. And then what are the other elements? If you do lose-win, or typically it's a win-lose, so the salesperson goes too hard. But actually, what we forget about is the lose-win, which is where the salespeople try and keep the relationship going with the customer and do them a deal where they're happy, but the margin's quite low. So, and if you ask a salesperson, are you happy? Yeah, I've made enough money. But it's not really win-win, because what you're actually doing is you're setting up a mindset that you'll back down and either give on price or give something away for free. And that's not always win-win either. So I think a lot of the definition understanding win-win is not true. So I think let's get the definition right and really challenge people on actually what is win-win, what is lose-win, what is win-lose, and what happens with these things. And of course you can do lose-win short-term for an individual thing, but it's not going to help as a long-term solution. So I think it's the mindset and definition of win-win and how much you challenge your customers and hold your ground. So it's perfectly okay to be commercially strong. And I think some salespeople give on price too much, too quickly, because they're worried about the relationship. But a true win-win orientation is helping them and being proud and owning the fact we're a commercial organisation and we're going to do this to help you as much as possible. But I could own my space a bit more. And I think Challenger Sale talked about that a little bit. They talked about it under sort of taking control, not being aggressive, but being assertive. I call it sort of ownership, owning your commerciality and not being afraid that it is worth what it is. And that takes a while for salespeople to get that. I think that's a bit of experience of realising that it does work. So the experience of holding your ground commercially, I think the top tip to get that is to do more feedback calls.
Okay, go.
So yeah, so as you know, I love feedback calls, but the feedback calls about a particular sale, and it's basically asking the very powerful question, did you actually get the benefits that you expected to get from this project? And being really direct with that question. There's lots of ways that question can go, which I won't go into, but what's interesting with that question, more times than not, the customer will say yes, and not only do they get the benefits they expected, but something in addition happened. Now, what happens with salespeople, linking back to the win-win, is the more I ask that question, customers say, actually, it was worth it. Before I ask that question, maybe I've sold them £100,000 worth of kit or £10 million worth of kit. Doesn't really matter what the amount is. Most salespeople I know are thinking, it's not really worth that much money, is it? Because they don't really think it sounds like a lot of money. Okay. And so they're sort of half hoping the customer will buy it. And then when they ask them afterwards, the customer goes, it was valuable. That was worth every single penny because it affected our business. And when as a salesperson, I hear a customer say that to me, it gives me much more confidence the next time to say, it's a lot of money, but I am worth it. That project is worth it.
Excellent. So we're back to mindset again. You're doing a lot
of a definition of mindset, but also then proving that actually it does work. Because else, how can people believe it? If you tell people these things, it doesn't always work. But the feedback one is a practical action they can do.
That's a brilliant tip. Oh, you're full of top tips today, Claire. This is brilliant stuff. Thank you. Appreciate it. And again, there's a couple of some fantastic sound bites in there. Owning your commerciality. I love that. I've not heard you say that one before, actually, but
yeah, I've used it. Yeah, owning your ground. Yeah, I quite like it. Thank you.
Borrowing that one too. No, that's great. I mean, again, we sort of naturally segue into the next thing, because another element of partnering skills is to recognise that it's about interdependence. not independence, not being dependent. But for me, I like to translate that into more of kind of collaboration, working together, teamwork. And I guess by those review meetings, you're already starting, your review calls, you're starting to sort of help people get their head around that as well. So what else would you add into sort of mindset, if you like, of this interdependent relationship that we've got?
Yeah, I think independence is a really interesting one, and this could be one of those things that starts splitting out the solution selling, maybe to the partner selling, that sort of next level up, really. Because I think, to my mind, as soon as you start interdependence, on the conversation so far has been quite a lot about a salesperson, and I think when you start talking about independence, I think you're starting to talk about account management, key account management, enterprise selling, and so forth. Because to have genuine interdependence has to be more than just one-on-one relationship. It's got to be multi-level, multi-layer relationships where they're all working together. So I think it's a different level of selling, and generally moving into key account management. Now, salespeople can build on that interdependence, of course, as well. But I think generally, for my mind, that'd be more useful for the key accounts. And obviously, a lot of IT salespeople are actually key account managers anyway. They're not selling just one product or one service. They're selling a lot. So to get that interdependence, multi-level, multi-layer, getting manager to manager, directors to directors talking to each other, marketing teams working together. And another key word, a colleague of mine does a lot of customer advocacy, so genuinely sort of working together as well. So I think that's true interdependence, and I don't think many organisations have that as much as they would like to have it.
It's a tough one. I mean, I think to be genuinely, like you say, interdependent, it's a big call.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I tend to move more towards collaboration, to start to think about being more collaborative, work on things together, similar kind of work on the outcomes that both parties are looking for. That for me then does tend to work even a more more individual or more of a sort of a lone salesperson level. But you're dead right. As the complexity and the value increases, more people get involved. And again, you talk about research. Research is showing that buying committees, decision-making units are just on the up again. Higher and higher all the time. Okay, no, interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said about the buying units. We know that, as you say, the research is saying that the buying units are getting bigger. So more people are involved in buying decisions than any other time before. There's much more consensus buying decisions made in organisations now. And of course, a large part of that is to do with the economy and the 2008 crash and so forth. People are a bit more nervous. So they want more people to be involved. And of course, as sales, we've got to react to that. So we need to have more more people involved in the sales team as well. Whether it's a sales team or count team, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, very much got
accepting that there's more people.
Follow the buying process. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw some interesting stuff the other day where, yes, the research is showing that the number of people in the buying decision are increasing. Salespeople don't think they are. There's a bit of a worry there. I mean, there's guys who got big blind spots that certainly need those opening up, but
and the big move towards the line of business role as well, so which typically a lot of salespeople don't speak to. And if you've got genuine independence, you have to be speaking to people who are actually running the company and managing the just not just finance or C-level or IT, but actually the line of business people in the business. And a lot of salespeople are not talking to them, and that's genuine independence, because if you don't really understand where the business is trying to get to, if you are a high level solution provider, enterprise value-based provider, then that's what you have to do, or a partner. That's going into partnering then, I think, in your terminology, I think.
Yeah, moving more and more towards it. As I say, I'm using the partnering skills to help salespeople give the veneer to what they're doing, because I think it does filter down at every single level, and every salesperson can benefit from just understanding these and taking some of the good bits, like you're highlighting here, to make their own approach better. Because customers will like it more.
Yeah, I think that's where it's. I'm really excited about seeing your book actually, and seeing some of the stuff you've come out. Because I think in the same way I look at consultative selling or solution selling or strategic selling, whatever you call it, some of the techniques in that any salesperson can use to be a better salesperson. So partnering, anybody could use it, parts of it.
Yeah, the partnering skills, absolutely. So, and again, one of the other elements, one of the skills that's been identified as part of partner intelligence is this this whole element of self-disclosure and feedback, which again ultimately it's about communication. But it's quite interesting in that we're saying that good salespeople should be able to give stuff about themselves through the self-disclosure part, but equally give feedback to customers. So again, I'd love to pick your brains on that and think, how can salespeople start to share that information, do you think, to be effective?
That's an interesting one, because I think from the things we've talked about so far, I would say that's probably one of the hardest things for salespeople to do, because I think that's moving into sort of almost more of a management consultancy role, which is what partnership is about, really. And if you're a consultant and being paid for a consultant, then the customer expects you to give feedback. Salespeople, a lot of customers wouldn't expect a salesperson to do that, but that is definitely going towards more partnering, without a doubt, of suggestions. So if I then also link that to Challenger, just because it's good research as well, of course they talk about challenging the customer, which in an assertive way. So that could link to the feedback, I think, which is quite not being afraid to say, why are you doing it this way, or have you thought about this, or other people are doing it this way. Just checking and challenging what's going on there in a non-aggressive way, of course, which of course Challenger does talk about. So I think I think you can give feedback to a customer. The difficulty when you're a partner or you're a salesperson with giving feedback is, will the customer listen? Does the customer want you to give feedback? So that's how you manage that, I think, is an interesting skill. But also, even if you give feedback, ultimately, you have to remember that the customer's still the customer. And we know that people like to make their own choice and make their own decision. So you might give somebody feedback, and if you were in their position, you'd make decision A. But no matter how much we try and put ourselves in the shoes of the other customer, the customer's still themselves. And with the same feedback, they go for decision B. So I think it's good to give feedback, but you've got to do it in a very, I suppose, consultative manner, if I want a better word.
Yeah, I mean, one of the areas I think this could be useful, and perhaps not an area that salespeople are accustomed to do this, even probably account managers, is to give feedback to the customer about how they are in the relationship. Okay. We'll be quite happy to go and sort of talk to them and say, how are we doing? What can we do better? What do you want from us? Yeah. But it kind of stops at that stage. Yeah, so if we're going to be genuinely sort of in this thing together, if we're going to collaborate, if we are trying to be mutually dependent with all that stuff we've said so far, it's saying, well, it does take two to tango, and actually you don't help us sometimes, or you do these things. Yeah. It could be blind spots. They might not realise, we thought we were making life easy for you, or okay, is that?
That's really interesting, actually, because I remember working on a very large training team, working for a large retail bank. And it's got 6, 7, 8 years ago, and they got all their providers into a room and then asked them for feedback on them. It's the only place I've ever come across it before. And so they were consciously asking all their providers, sales and consultants and so forth, to give them feedback on how the relationship was working, which is just brilliant, really. Because as you say, the salespeople tend to focus on just, what are we doing, what can we do better, as opposed to, what are we doing, we can do better, and here's some thoughts that we think you could do better, which will impact us both.
Proper open discussion by the sounds of things.
Absolutely, yeah. So that was very interesting. And I think if people did that more, and therefore to be open about it, the self-disclosure, we're not perfect, but ultimately maybe it comes back as well to the sort of interdependence win-win, which is, if we both agree what the common goal is here that we're trying to help you to achieve, so business outcome, or whatever you want to call it, this is the business outcome we're both trying to achieve, that we're trying to help you to do this better, more effectively, whatever, and we're trying to owning our own commerciality and be successful. That's part of the self-disclosure, which links to feedback as well. But yes, actually, if we really want these business outcomes, then we need to be more open, transparent.
Again, one of the things you said, I just capture this out, but I wrote it down. So again, I quite like the terminology, which is that we are a commercial organisation. Yeah. And even that, to a degree, is the sort of disclosure saying, we're not just in this for fun. We have to get something out of it. If we set it all up right, we will all be happy with this. But let's be grown up and have a kind of open discussion about that stuff.
Yeah.
And it feeds back into that sales, that positive mindset stuff that you started off talking about.
Yeah. It's sort of like, what am I worth? What are you worth? What is this worth to you? And actually really understanding the value of it all. and holding the ground on that.
Yeah, correct. Whilst more than likely, and I'm moving us on sort of reasonably quickly, moving on to the next element of partnering skills, which is comfort with change. So more often than not, the salesperson is going to be selling change. That, you know, the salesperson's change agent, I'm pretty comfortable with, actually. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But it's easier said than done, isn't it?
It is interesting. I mean, salespeople, by their very nature, they get their targets changed whatever weekly, monthly, yearly there is. So they get an awful lot of changes to them. Maybe because they have so much change thrown at them, a lot of salespeople get quite comfortable with the same accounts, the same contacts in the same accounts, and the same way of doing it the way they've always done it, which may have worked for a while. But as we know, the world is changing. So being much more aware about things that are changing, both in my own organisation as a sales organisation, but obviously with my customer. So they're quite good at focusing with the change of the customer. They don't always think about the changes that themselves are going through. I'm not sure how comfortable salespeople are genuinely, because they have quite a lot of change automatically.
Yeah. Or maybe conversely, actually think about what you said there, because they do experience so much change themselves and are used to it, and it's what they do. Maybe they don't appreciate from a customer's point of view. They might be giving an idea of, this is going to be quite a big change for them, which for them is normal. It's what they do, and for a customer, it's like, whoa, this is big. You know, this is new, hard.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually, because I don't think they really think through sometimes when there's a large implementation of something, that even if it's going to save the customer a lot of money or even make the customer a lot of money, the hassle of the change and the risk of the change is sometimes it's better to stay where you are, even if financially a company might work off, because actually the change itself is too risky and things could go wrong. So the risk is just not worth the balance. So I think that's quite interesting. And I think some salespeople don't appreciate that. They think, well, why did the customer do this? I've demonstrated the value of it. I've shown them the ROI, but they're still not doing it. Because
they've not looked on the other side of the balance, but it's risky.
They just don't see it. As you say, whether that's because they are comfortable with change, that's interesting. It's complex, It
is complex, and again, I'm sort of thinking of, again, just from us as trainers, and how much we equip salespeople to talk about change and to be comfortable talking to customers about their change. I'm certainly wondering if that's an area that we probably could add more into the way in which we equip them to make sense and to explain what might be obvious to them. Quite, in a better way.
Sorry, that's made me think, actually, because one of the things that I've done, which I know that you quite like as well, is I talk about the buying process a lot, getting salespeople to really understand the buying process, but also the fact that any buying process always starts with some sort of catalyst or change. Something must happen to enable the customer to recognize there is a need of some sort. So whether it's the network goes down, or there's latency problems with the network, or it breaks or something, that forces a change. The breaks are a typical one. But also, if you're an account manager and you're looking after large accounts and you're doing partnership approach, then you should really be understanding the industry and the company that they're in. So one of the acronyms, obviously, that people use when they look at research is PESTEL or PESTEL. So really understanding what politically, economically, socially, technologically, legally, and environmentally is impacting this organisation and will impact this organisation, and how over the next 12, 18 months or 2 to 3 years. So having a little bit of an external view for that company. So almost being like a consultant on that company. And really, salespeople nowadays should be expected to do that much more.
I agree with you. I think expected is the right word. It's, without that, you haven't got a ticket to the party. It's what value are you bringing me if you don't understand some of the changes that my organisation is going through? But if you do, and if you can point out stuff that maybe customers don't realise, well, actually, then we're now really talking, because that's where they can start to add value. Cool. I mean, again, so I want to go through all the 6. So the last element then, and again, they're all linked, funnily enough, is the element of future orientation. So again, it's the ability to sort of make decisions more looking towards the future rather than dwelling on the past and how we always used to do things, and this is what's happened. And I think I think you did actually already start to touch on that, saying that that's how we do stuff around here, and so this is the way we need to operate. Again, how can we help salespeople sort of help themselves, if you like, to become more future oriented?
Well, I suppose the future orientation, it depends what you mean by that exactly, and how far into the future. So I think a lot of this is to do with management and leadership, almost more so than sales staff, because how are we managing the salespeople? What KPIs are we giving them? How often are we doing that? So if we're asking them every day to tell us what they've sold, that's going to create more of a transactional approach, for example. And what are we trying to get, and what are the KPIs? And if we focus just on financial figures, commercial figures, and short-term figures, then no wonder the salespeople don't have any future orientation. Because at the end of the day, what they're being targeted with is hitting their target. And if they don't hit their target, they tend not to keep their job unless they're doing some great inputs, which, with good sales organizations, they'll look at that. And to get that balance, I think one of the hardest things for salespeople to do is to get the balance between closing sort of down the sales today, sort of finishing those off, getting your target today or this month or this quarter, and spending some time working on 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is, 24 months, splitting that time between short-term and longer-term sales. Because if you don't do the longer term, you don't have the future, of course. So it's just a classic thing of, I don't know, whether they call it hunting and farming or prospecting versus current campaigns. It's that balance, continually looking at other opportunities and future orientation. I think even the good guys are probably only looking 3 to 6 months ahead. But I think a lot of that is management and leadership and what they're measuring.
I think you're right. I think you're right to call it out there. I mean, it's a bugbear of mine when we're asked to help people to become more future oriented, look at bigger projects, grander opportunities, strategic account planning, all the rest of it. And almost as you're walking out the door from doing the training, they're going, but it's the end of the month, so we're actually going to have a call that day tomorrow. And it's like, well, just forget all the stuff you've learned. I don't know, that's kind of an extreme example, but you're right. You've got to give people a fair crack at the whip if we want them to be able to orientate themselves and their customers, because that's what we're asking them to do. Right back to your first point, it's working with the customer to help them build that trust because they're getting something out of it.
And linking it back to the trust point, go right to the very top, a customer won't share their future orientation or their roadmaps, whatever it is they're going to, or their business goals are, unless they trust you as well. So it comes full circle, doesn't it? So the salesperson might have future orientation, but to persuade the customer to share that. But, I've seen some great examples of some really good key account stuff or strategic accounts where you've had, boards from both organizations, the sales organization, the buying organization, working together and have every 6 months having a 1 or 2 days away. How are we going to work together? What are we going to work on? What projects? And that's true independence and future orientation. And then making sure, but then you've got operational behind the scenes.
When it all comes together, it is a thing of beauty. But as I say, and it can be at that top level business alliance type thing. That's the sort of a pure partnership is how I tend to talk about that. But I think salespeople, even from just what we've done in sort of half an hour kicking this around, there's little bits that salespeople can take and use this thinking to very much sort of get their mindset right, and consequently some of the things that they can say and do practically with customers to give them that polish, into whichever way they're selling. And I think from quite a sort of a basic sale, right up to, as you said.
So what you're saying is if we have a much better understanding of partnership intelligence, partnership skills, then the salespeople can take out parts of those to help them be a better salesperson, basically.
There's always like the icing on the cake that you can just really make it so much more effective in the things that you're doing. Probably quite well already. Well, we want to do more than quite well. We want to do very well. We want to do excellent. So, I mean, you've already given some great little hints and tips and very practical things that people can do to be able to start to tap into this way of thinking. Which you're right. It's not language that we're necessarily using outside of channel, outside of being a full partner manager. But I think we can bring this stuff into direct sales and people at all levels to use that. Cool. I mean, on the subject of future, I mean, I do have my eye on the clock. What does the future have in store for you? What are the next projects for Clare for Marlowe Sales Academy?
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, it's quite interesting actually. So looking at probably building more digital, I think, more digital, and definitely more. There's more remote training going on, definitely. So I've been obviously over the last few months, I've been doing a lot more Zoom, and I think there'll be more blended program moment. I have been recommending that to customers. I've been doing blended programs for years anyway. I think a lot of people thought face to face was so much better, and what do I agree? I think face to face is better. Is it worth the extra cost? I don't know, because the convenience of Zoom training is great. And as long as you do it with all the best practice, and the way that I do it, I make it as close to face as possible. So there's a flip chart, there's a video, I can see all my people on videos on a big screen. They can see me, they can put their hands up, they go into chat rooms, they have breaks. I think there's going to be more blended and more online. I mean, it's been around for a while, but I think it's much more interactive and more useful and more bite-sized, much more bite-sized. People don't want the long programs anymore, and make it more carry on doing the apply things. So short and sharp, apply it, short and sharp, apply it, coming back. So a sort of mixture of coaching, training, facilitative, best practice. So training is different, I think, nowadays than it was, say, 20 years ago.
I think you're right. No, again, we've chatted a lot sort of outside of this episode, if you like, about blended, and I'm definitely with you on that. And you know, we're both glass half full people, aren't we? And can see the benefits that that's going to bring. You know, we can do a better job potentially. Well, can do a better job, not even potentially. I know we can. So more digital, more remote, more blended stuff for you. That sounds interesting. How can people get in touch with you? You know, if they want to talk to you about how they can tap into more of these ideas that you've just started on, because there's some good stuff in there. I suspect people might want to.
So basically, Marlowe Sales Academy, and basically, if you just send it to Clare.O'Shea@Marlowe Sales Academy, that'll come. Actually, no, it's Clare at Marlowe Sales Academy. Apologies. Whoops. I should know my own email, shouldn't I? So yeah, just Clare, Clare, like the county, at marlowesalesacademy.com. That gets me through there. Or have a look at the website, and there's a few videos on there. There's a few sort of reading lists, sort of some bit of resource to get people to think about, try and add a bit of value. So feel free to have a look at those as well. So basically, it's just lists of sales book or even non-sales books, I think, useful for salespeople that I think are the best out there, or the most useful out there, I think. So it's quite interesting.
Oh, go on then. One last little cheeky question. I wasn't going to ask it, but you've set me up now. What's the non-sales book that you'd recommend? One non-sales.
The non-sales book would be what's it called? Eating the Frog, is it? Eating the Frog? Eat That Frog by Brian Tracy. Brilliant. I think that's just a brilliant book by Brian Tracy. It's very short. It's a fantastic plan. It's people think it's a time management book. It's actually a planning book. So for any entrepreneur, any salesperson, and it looks at both business, work-life balance, personal, and has some great tips in it. Really good, nice and short. And there's a lovely video about eating that frog, which is basically eat the frog first, because it's the most disgusting tasting thing first, to avoid procrastination. But so that's the simplest bit of the frog. But in actual fact, it's a great planning book, I think, and it gets you thinking.
Brilliant. Adding value right to the end, Claire. Love it. No, thank you for that. So Clare, Clare at Marlowe Sales Academy.com. And as you say, thank you for offering to listeners the opportunity to look at the videos and things that you're sharing on there as well. So that's really cool.
I look forward to getting a signed copy of the book, of course.
You will get one of those. Absolutely. That will be my pleasure to give you that.
Excellent.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, Claire.
My pleasure. Speak to you soon, Fred.
Speak soon. Cheers. Thank you for listening to the Selling Through Partnering Skills podcast with me, Fred Copestake. If you liked it, why not leave a review? If you didn't, also leave one. Remember, it's all about the feedback. If you want to learn more about your own PQ, why not go to the book website, which is www.throughpartnering.co.uk, and there you can take a little self-audit. And of course, if you want to get in touch to talk about how you can use partnering skills, you can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. So until next time, keep thinking about how you can adopt a more modern and collaborative approach to selling by selling through partnering skills.